After years of boring Skytoss play in Protoss vs Zerg, we finally have a new and interesting playstyle that has taken the meta by storm. Hero's Stalker style has revolutionized the matchup, and without a doubt has made it the most enjoyable matchup for me to play and watch. This video will teach you everything you need to know to take this macro style to the ladder and beat some Zerg players. We'll be looking at how the German player Showtime approaches this style. So let's just jump right on into the game. It's Solar versus Showtime. This was played at Homestory Cup. I think they played a best of 5. It was a good series. I would recommend you watching it. The replays are now available online. So if you're looking for some of the other games that he played in this series, or Showtime played a bit against Serral, Neeb versus Serral, Astray versus Serral, they're all really good series to look at the modern PvZ and some adaptations on it. This game, we're just going to look at the stock standard Hero PvZ build order, and it's going to teach you a lot, because I think when Hero does a build order, it can be very, very difficult to actually copy it. Hero has this unique aura about him, where build orders that he does can oftentimes be a bit tricky for people like us to do. Whereas when Showtime, the wall gets it, he makes it a very easy to follow build order that's easy to replicate and easy just to do and follow. So that's what I'm going to be going over today. Now, one thing I will just say really quickly is that we go for a gateway scout, and the reason we go for a gateway scout is because we don't want to hatch block. The issue with hatch blocking is it forces the Zerg opponent to take these third bases. And we don't want Zerg to take that if we're not going to be capitalizing on the negatives that is. So the big positive that taking this third base grants the Zerg is that their creep spread is towards your base much quicker. Obviously, creep spread starts here compared to here. Very big difference. But the big negative, of course, of taking this third base, or this one, is that, adepts become much more potent. But we're not going to be going for adepts this game. We're not going to be putting on any early adept pressure. And we're not even going to be chrono boosting out an adept. So because we don't have the ability to punish a hatch block, we don't go for it. Now, the probe goes in, it scouts, it saw a hatchery when it walked in, maybe a quarter done. So already just from seeing the hatchery, there's not a 12 pool. But in order to figure out that nothing else strange is happening, what you want to do is check for the timing on the spawning pool and on the natural hatchery. They should both finish at 2 minutes. So in this case, spawning pool is finished. He sees a queen being produced, and you'll also see a queen being produced at the natural. So what does this tell us? If the spawning pool finished earlier, it means it's some weird ling flood. It might have been like a 15 hatch, 14 pool sort of weird thing. Because we see the 2 queens, what it means is that there cannot be a proxy hatchery. So if he saw queens missing, it means that he would then check the third base. So as soon as the core finishes back at home, this was of course 20 Nexus, 20 core, 21 gas, 22 pylon. As soon as the core finishes, you build a Stargate, you start an adept, but you do not chrono boost it. Instead, we only chrono boost probes from this point out until our Stargate finishes. After the adept, he gets a stalker. Now, one really cool trick is that he shades out the adept and sends it towards his natural ramp. The reason why he does this is oftentimes Zerg players want to send Zerglings across the map and sneak them back into your main base. So the idea of this is that you shade away, but run up to your natural, and then you either cancel it or you don't cancel it. And there's no way for Zerg to know if your adept is at home, ready to defend those lings, or if the adept is coming across the map. It's a really smart idea and I really like it. Now, once the Stargate finishes, we're going to start an Oracle and then a Pylon. In every single matchup, whether it's Protoss vs Terran, Protoss vs Protoss, and Protoss vs Zerg, you start an Oracle, you also start a Pylon. Very, very simple. It's how you don't get supply block. And then with the next 150 minerals, you're going to complete the wall. Very simple. Now, the Stalker Oracle combo is going to be really effective on maps with this high ground location. Obviously, Solar isn't a chump. He's not an idiot. So he just sends it away to safety. It's not something that's possible to do on every map, but on this one, it certainly is somewhat viable. Now, when the first Oracle is completed, you send it to your third base. You do not send it across the map because you're trying to take a really early third base and you need this against any committed ling floods. But we're going to start a second Oracle, and really when the second one comes out, you can start to scout or you can start to send it across the map. So Nexus goes down, and it's very important to remember as the dog moves out of the way that you immediately get a pylon at the third Nexus as well. Creates a nice choke point for this adept. But importantly, you need it to not get supply blocked. Now, after that is done, you get 1 gas, you get a 2nd gas. Unlike the earlier hero styles that were 3 gas, the double gas style is definitely the macro variant of them and what we'll be looking at today. If you wanted to do a big 8-gate Stalker timing attack, just off the 3 bases, you'd only go the 3 gas. You don't need the 4th gas for that. So then we add a 3rd oracle, and we'll notice that what Showtime has done is once his 2 oracles are out, he sends them across the map to scout. Now, I don't entirely recommend this. I think what's easier to do is leave 1 at home and send the 2nd one out to scout, and then let the 3rd one meet up with the 2nd one. He's not going to get any damage done, but I'm going to tell you what he would have been looking for at this point. So if we look at his vision, he hasn't really seen anything. He hasn't gone into the main again. What he needs to do is he needs to go into the main, check if there's a lair building, or into the natural if there's a lair building. It's very unlikely that there's a lair building at the 3rd base because they're building queens out of it. But so you check if there's a lair. Once you see that there is no lair, you start to get a bit worried about a ling flood. So you might be a bit more defensive at home. You might warp in a couple more adepts, get a shield battery. The other thing that you then need to look out for is whether or not there's an evo chamber. So no lair, no evo chamber, there's a ling flood coming. But in this case, Solar has gone for the +1 melee, so completely standard play. Now, Twilight went down after the 2 gases, and then a Forge will also go down. It's completely standard build order, and then 2 more gateways will follow. You get Blink out of this Twilight, and +1 attack out of this Forge. The other thing that you would be looking for is if you did see a lair, if the lair finished, you're starting to think, wow, could be Nidus Worm, because it's a very quick lair. So you start looking around for the tech building. So this wasn't the ling flood that I was talking about. It's an amount of lings, but it's not a scary amount of lings. Very easy to warp in just a few more adepts, and you're completely safe to deal with this. I'm not going to worry too much about these oracles. Honestly, in your games, if you can't get damage done, I mean, you might be able to get damage done, snipe an entire mineral line. Awesome. If you can't, don't worry. The oracles are going to be so useful later with their energy, just being able to deal with lings, build stasis wards. Now at the 3rd base, we're going to be chrono boosting out probes. Just keep chrono boosting out all the probes. You want to get up to saturation as quickly as possible. And then we're going to warp in 2 sentries, which I would say is a bit unusual because the big thing about, the Stalker style previously when you're playing 3 gas, you didn't have a lot of gas, right? So you couldn't afford these sentries. When you're building Stalkers, they cost a lot of minerals compared to sentries. So the nice thing about this is, yes, you're mining 3 extra workers on gas, but it means that because you've saved minerals by building sentries, you can get these 4 extra gateways down quicker. So this is what you're going to be looking to do as well. So on this map, it's very simple where we war with 4 extra gateways, and usually you'll be able to find it on the map quite simply. If it's on a map like Moondance, where you're taking the in-base natural, then you just build the 4 extra gateways in your main base. They don't need to form a part of the wall. Now, unfortunately, Showtime's going to get caught a little bit out of position in a sec, I think. If the oracles were at home to defend this, it would be way easier to clean up. It's going to have to use his force fields, which is really, really unfortunate. The issue with using these force fields is the other great thing about the sentry is that you have hallucination and that you can scout with it. As soon as these sentries reached 75 energy, he would have double hallucinated. He would have sent them up this way, very, very simply, up towards the top and above the Zerg's base. You don't want to send it through the Zerg base because it's going to die to a spore crawler. So you send it up above, all the way around the top, and then down the side through this area. It's very unlikely that they hide, building here. And if they do, your oracles have probably already seen it. So you're scouting the back edges of the base with your hallucinated phoenix. That's what he would have done if he didn't have to use all that force field energy. So instead, what you want is to leave the 2 sentries at your 3rd base, warp in 2 adepts and 6 stalkers total. Don't warp them in, but that should be your army. Showtime lost 2 adepts in this game, so maybe you'd have 3 adepts, that's totally fine as well. But I would have warped in, the 4 stalkers from his gateways before taking this 4th base. Now you take this 4th nexus, get a pylon here, you're going to want to build a shield battery and a cannon. This is a stylistic choice that Showtime chooses to make in this game. He doesn't apply pressure as quickly because he knows he's up against +1 Zerglings. He's seen a lot of Zerg units out on the map. But if the Zerg was being more passive, what he would have done was he would have had these 6 Stalkers, 2 Adepts, and sent them across the map with the Oracles and start clearing up creep. If you scout that your opponent is playing Zergling styles, then from your Stargate, building extra Oracles is the way to go. So now that he has his fighting force out, he's going to send the Stalkers across the map. Once +1 attack finishes, you're going to get +2 attack, you're going to get charge. I would also recommend, and you could have done this earlier, dropping down a 2nd Forge. because you want to get double upgrades essentially every game that you play this style, because I think it's probably the way that you're going to win a lot of games. Double upgraded Protoss units are really, really good, especially gateway units, so you need to make sure you get down the second forge. And the number of Stalkers that you're looking for, I mean, currently he has what? He has 13 Stalkers, and I think there's one in the wall. So he has 12 Stalkers in his army. You probably want to go up to at max 20 Stalkers. Once you reach that number, you're going to start building Zerglings behind it. So he's going to move out on the map, start clearing some creep. You have a lot of oracles. You can build a stasis ward here as well for the retreat. That's really effective. Now, showtime is kind of crazy. I wouldn't recommend going this deep on creep, especially without a stasis ward to fall back on. I think it's a bit of an overcommitment, but that's totally fine. Activate the oracles, and when you activate the oracles, what you need to do is remember to put them on hold position, especially if there's queens in the fight. So if these queens were in the fight a bit earlier, you need to make sure that oracles are on hold position so that they don't automatically attack the queens. You'll learn to do the micro very easily. It's just hold position oracles above your army, and blink away, then they get hurt. So I think this was a bit of an overcommitment by showtime. It definitely wasn't the best thing in the world. So at this point, no more Stalkers, at least for a while. What you immediately switch into is just pure Zealot production. And then on one side, the idea is to be pushing this side of the map with Stalkers. You can be so aggressive when you have Oracle energy, because, you know, Zerg units can't commit on your Stalkers off creep. And then while you're pushing this side, you've warped in Zealots and you've run up. Unfortunately, Banelings find these Zealots, but the idea is there, and the idea is solid. That hurts, man. But yeah, so these Zealots would have run into this base, obviously there's nothing there, so it would have run up into this base. And it's very, very hard for Zerg players to split. Like, it's super difficult. Fifth base going down. Templar Archives has now also gone down. So once you start building Zealots, you're no longer spending gas on Stalkers. So what you really want to do is get Templar Archives down so that you can start building Archons, start getting Storm. As you can see, he warps in another wave of Zealots, another 10 Zealots, and the way he did this was he warped in on this side of the wall. But yeah, so Zealots on the top side, Stalkers on the bottom side, cancels a base, like it's really amazing. Now he's going to push up, clear some creep. This is how you play this style. So the game plan is pretty simple. Attack on two sides at once. And if you're not in Grandmaster, just this simple act will probably kill majority of the Zerg opponents that you're up against. One thing that I will remind you to do is that behind all this, you need to be adding shield batteries and cannons at your bases. Now, as the game goes on, what you want to be doing is starting to add Archons and adding a double robo transition. If you're being really aggressive, then the double robo transition can be a lot slower. Now that Archons are out, the game plan remains the same. You're going to have an army, might be Stalker, Archon. You want to have a few Zealots in there on one side of the map. And then on the other side of the map, warp in 10 more Zealots and attack the top. Once your double robo is finished, you get some observers, of course, but you go into double robo immortal production. And you'll find that, especially if you've gone double forge, Protoss ground units, Charge Lord Immortal Archon trade so well against anything Zerg can throw at you. So let's see how this fight goes. Storm isn't finished yet, so you just have to defend this with gateway units. Banelings are strong, but you have so many gateways. You have Archons, you have Blinkstalkers. Oh, Storm, Storm, Storm! And Storm definitely does help. But even if he didn't have Storm in this game, right, he would have been fine. And at this point, I'm thinking, well, Showtime has won this game, right? Showtime is at 92 workers. He needs to take a 6th base very shortly, which he will be trying to do. And he's forced Solar to be quite broke. I will always say that you don't want Zealots in your main army. So anytime that, you know, you have to defend a counterattack and you end up with Zealots in your army, that's fine. Do that. They're really good warp-in units. But as soon as you get a free moment in the game, you want to counterattack with them. Just split them off. So you just keep warping in Archons as your units, you know, start to get traded out, because then you're going to end up with a huge Archon count, huge Immortal count. And I will say that this game starts to get a bit funky. We see that Showtime actually goes across the map and is like, okay, I'm just going to attack you. I can defend that. And Solar's like, I cannot defend this. So he then attacks the 4th base. Showtime recalls a portion of his army, and this is what loses him this game. Spoiler alert. He does a terrible recall into +3 Zerglings that I think have adrenal glands. So he did a really bad recall right there. He needed to recall more of his army. And you're probably thinking, even with all these lurkers, are we sure that Showtime would have won this game. And I honestly think that if he did not screw up this recall, the defense here would have gone much better. He's already put, Solar's economy and expansions into a bit of strife and trouble. But instead, he loses 4 Archons, a bunch of Stalkers, loses his 5th base. Unfortunately, yes, you can lose the game very quickly against Zerg if you take a bad, indecisive attack. But I think in general, this playstyle is just so fun to play. So I recommend that you guys try out this style. Eventually, the transition is to go to carriers, and that only really happens if the Zerg is mega turtling. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking for more scouting tips in Protoss vs Zerg, be sure to watch this video.